Welcome to the Growth Whisperers Podcast, where everything we talk about is building enduring great companies because we're interested in it and passionate about it and research it and spend our days working with people that want to build great companies for the long term. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined today, as always, with Brad Giles, my co-host. Brad, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Yep, really good. Finally, we've got a break in the weather. It has rained what seems like forever, and I saw blue sky for the first time today. So that's always going to cheer one up. How are you doing?
Was that the first time in your life, or just the first time in a few weeks?
Gee, I tell you what, it feels like it. It's just been rain, as heavy as can be. Anyway, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's in the middle of our summer, loving it. And just a very busy week. But we're making time for this episode, which is awesome. So what are we digging into today? I think this is the second in a two series focus that we're having here, I believe.
It sure is. It's a topic that comes up all the time. How the best leaders hold people accountable. People that we talk to, look at all levels of an organization, are challenged on how do I hold people accountable, or I don't like holding people accountable. And they've got this kind of thing in their mind about a drill sergeant in the army, perhaps. And they're like, it's not me. I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable. So we're digging into that today.
Awesome. It's going to be interesting. And it's, we work on this one a lot. Lots of people work on this one a lot. So real quickly, our word or phrase of the day. What do you have today, Brad?
Look, I have retreat. Retreat. Retreat is an interesting word, and I have it because it can mean different things to different people. And in the context that we would conduct a retreat, it's all about work. And if you're a leadership team, what's on my mind is, and you're going away, you should be as productive as you can as a leadership team on a retreat, and not just going away to the valley to sip wine and build relationships in air quotes. So that's what's on my mind, retreat.
It's interesting because when we go do those retreats, people think we're going off and having a vacation. Often we'll work like 12 hours a day, and we'll have fun too. But they're usually very hard working, but people back in the office think it's a mini vacation. So yeah, great one. Mine is speed of trust. Or the speed of trust. And there's a guy, Stephen Covey's son, I think it was Stephen R. I might apologize if I get his name wrong. Stephen Covey's son wrote a book, Speed of Trust. The book was okay for me. But the one principle is he talked about when you have trust, things move quickly. And I'm just finishing up a contract with someone on a project who started off really strong and then started to fall on their face. And the reality is the less you trust, the more you put stuff in writing. And the more you follow up and the more you chase, and everything slows down and grinds to a halt. And so having the right people allows speed because there is trust and everything flows easier. So we're talking about the retreat of trust today, Brad. A little retreat, working hard. Actually, you know what? It's working hard to have trust so things can move quickly.
Yeah.
And also when you've got trust, it's more enjoyable too. All right, well, let's drop right into this second part. So the first part was really, we were talking about the elements of accountability, the different things you could have in place. And, when you talk, and if you haven't listened to it yet, recommend that you go back and listen to the previous episode 72. And, we talked about, starting with yourself and being accountable, having crystal clear goals, clear metrics or KPIs, depending on what you call them, clear behavioral expectations, real carrots and sticks, incentives and consequences, and then real transparent reporting. It's kind of the fundamental elements, and a lot of companies don't have them in place. Today, we're going to talk more almost on the emotional side or the leadership side, and it's basically how do you bring these to life? And, the main thing here to start off with, and we've seen lots of companies that will have all those tools, maybe not good versions of them, they just don't use them. They have a performance management system, but then they don't manage up the underperformers. They tolerate them. So they can check the boxes, but not really do the work.
Yeah.
And what we're going to get into today is it's great to have the tools, but you still actually have to do the work. And the work, especially around accountability, isn't a joyous thing to do. And I'll just share a little example. Today we had a meeting with a client, and they had to do a reorganization of a department. And within that reorganization, they had to make some changes. Some people's jobs changed, et cetera, et cetera. If you've ever done, that's excruciating process to go through. Like, it's not fun. And this one wasn't about accountability, but it was making very tough decisions that affect other human beings. And if you got a heart, that stuff's hard. And accountability is in that same sort of category. Sometimes it takes, resilience and rigor and pushing yourself sometimes, because it doesn't make you feel good, and you sure don't get a lot of love back from the other people. So that's kind of setting up. Brad, what would you kind of add into the overall thinking about this piece today?
Well, I agree, but it doesn't need to be hard. And that's the thing. If you've got the tools and you've got the environment or the behaviors, if you bring those two together, it doesn't need to be hard. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that if you aren't holding people accountable, do you really care? Do you really care?
True.
Right. Because, we can get them. We spoke last week about we can get, we can give them the environment. We can get them to own it, but it's only until they really own it that they take responsibility. So, it doesn't need to be that hard. It's not overwhelming, and you can build an environment with those elements that we discussed last week that is possible. So let's kind of dig into it. I'd add a little quick story. Consequence is an interesting thing, or accountability, for me personally, because many years ago I had my own firm, and we went down. I took the leadership team down to the wine region with their partners for 2 days over the weekend, and it cost $10,000. I remember very distinctly, to host them, and we went to this retreat, and we locked ourselves, myself and the leadership team, in this room trying to figure out what were the problems. And we were digging and digging and digging. Why were these problems here? And we came away with one word, which was quite expensive yet insightful, and that word was consequence. There wasn't a consequence for any of the actions that anyone in the organization was doing. So I myself thought that I was holding the people around me accountable, but it didn't traverse, because all of the other people were all friends with all of the people that reported to them.
Right. And as that wasn't part of the environment.
Correct. We didn't have the environment. I thought that we had some of the tools, and I think we did have some of the tools, but we didn't have the environment.
Yeah. And the great thing is that when you have the environment, which really means it's deep in the culture, the environment manages it, right? Instead of individuals managing. And that's why people building a strong culture is so important. Again, it's also work to build and maintain a culture, but then those cultural norms kick in, and then people take care of it for you. And that's the ideal thing, where it becomes, and that's what we're trying to get to a little bit today, is getting the environment to help take care of it. And the first point of that is that, you yourself need to lead by example to be creating it. And if you don't, then people will follow. And I always remember this one company I worked with, the CEO had one of those briefcases on wheels, like a lawyer bag on wheels, not the suitcase that you see on, but it's almost like a lawyer bag on wheels. Heck, most of the executives had the same damn things. Yeah. I work with a lot of executive teams. I've never seen an executive use one of those to regular office meetings, only when they might travel. So lawyer bags with wheels. Another company, all the executives in the meetings in the boardroom had iPads they worked off early, when iPads were first out, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Well, it's because the chairman had an iPad, and next thing you know, all the executives had iPads, right? So people model and follow senior leaders in all kinds of ways. Those are just two kind of almost silly ones, but starting off with your own accountability, and basically both in terms of your behaviors and your conversations, and talking about and focusing on things you want. Where a lot of leaders can get sucked into it is talking about problems too much, or focusing on problems too much. Well, then the whole room or company's energy focuses on those, but there might be bigger opportunities that are better for you. So it starts with setting it by example, not just in terms of accountability, but the things that you focus on, the things that you recognize, the things that you reward, because generally those things will start to expand because there's more energy on them. I know, Brad, you shared the example of, sing happy birthday and people will follow.
Yeah.
right? Or, you know,
It's in any social environment, people will follow a person's lead within reason. But it's not necessarily normal to just break out into song in a normal social environment. Yet, if someone sets the lead, let's say in a boardroom, and if the chairman of the board said, "Okay, well now it's person A's, it's Kevin's birthday, we're going to sing happy birthday," it may be completely weird, but if the chairman starts it, everyone else will follow through with that very short song to respect Kevin's birthday.
We did that yesterday with an executive that had their birthday. The CEO said something and started singing, and we all did it. Yes. And it was horrible because we were on Zoom and we weren't in sync. Like, it might have been the worst rendition of Happy Birthday ever, because it was hard to keep time together. Anyway, that's a side note. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a thing. And so that's relevant to singing happy birthday and some cultural stuff, but it plays out in terms of behavioral expectations and in terms of holding people accountable and creating an environment of accountability. That's the kind of the gold standard, an environment where we don't tolerate baloney, for want of an American term. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was in one company where the CEO, when someone didn't achieve things, almost made excuses for them.
Yeah.
Or when they didn't, they lied and misrepresented. And so they were just setting a bar of not, where another one would deliver the straight goods, say, I accomplished this, I missed this, I'm going to fix it. I feel kind of bad. I should have done better. Right? That's a very different example. So that's starting with you and creating that environment, and what you focus on gets more energy and attention, and being really aware of that.
Yeah. There's got to be we're going to talk about this in a moment. There's got to be some kind of consequence. There's got to be some kind of repercussion to set the expectations, the environment. Something will happen. It won't just pass. And certainly that's, as I mentioned, what was happening in my firm. I thought I was doing it, but no one else was. And so that still came back to me. Don't get me wrong. But people weren't trained. They didn't know how to do it.
Correct. All right. Well, the second one we've got, Liz, is basically conversations and how you actually have accountability conversations and how that cascades throughout the organization. And, we were preparing, Brad, and I love maybe you can share the example about the role playing, because that's, Brad shared an example he'll tell you in a minute, but, in the world of sales and many other things, people practice, firemen do drills, salespeople role play, athletes have practices. And one of the most important management tools is accountability. And I don't know I've ever heard of people practicing it, yet it's an insanely valuable skill. So Brad, you had a great example of how someone had done that.
Yeah, that's right. No one ever practices it. And I guess many people, be it a supervisor or a manager or an executive, oftentimes this is the highest level in an org chart that they've ever been. They've often never really been in this situation before. So I've found it quite useful within a leadership team or a management training to run this really simple exercise. And what we do is we break the group into groups of 3. And so then there would be one person who is playing the manager or the supervisor. There would be another person who is playing the subordinate of that manager or leader. And then there'd be the third person who is a scribe. So they would have a blank piece of paper and they'd be taking notes about the interaction. Now, the job of the manager is to endeavor to get an outcome from the subordinate, to kind of hold them accountable, to create a consequence, and to get the person to be able to see that maybe the error of their ways, but to kind of bring them back on track. But then I give them some notes to prepare that they have to read first about a hypothetical situation where what the subordinate is, quite, how would you say, quite difficult to deal with. They're like Teflon. Nothing touches them. The situation is that nothing touches them. They duck and weave. And I prime them on certain things to say about the situation. And the manager gets a brief also about the situation. And then, so they read it for a couple of minutes. We jump into role play. And so the manager's saying, if you and I role play, So Kevin, tell me about what happened when there was that theft at that particular site. And then Kevin saying, yeah, I don't know, someone else had that problem. Oh, so we role play like this back and forward.
Yeah.
And it's a situation that they've never been in before. So we would do that. Then we would come back together for, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes, talk about what worked and what didn't, and then we'd switch again. And then,
Brilliant.
yeah, so then, and then we'd switch again. So each person gets to play each of the 3 roles, because oftentimes they've never been in the situation where they can actually practice accountability.
Yeah. And they might just sidestep it in real life or do a crappy job or yell at the person. And yeah, it's look at role playing and practicing. We do it when we teach people how to train, how to interview, using top rating. Same thing, 3 people, the candidate, the interviewer, and the scribe. And the scribe is watching and gathering feedback, and you keep rotating. It's role playing is a very, very valuable thing. It really helps. Another tool on it that also helps in my book, Your Oxygen Mask First, I've got this conflict resolution model, 4 steps. And if you're going to have a sensitive conversation, which accountability might be, it helps you to prepare and break down your thoughts into 4 things, which is getting permission, making sure they're ready for the conversation, a couple of facts, how you feel about it, like the tension that it creates within you, and then resolution. Again, and what we often do with that is that we will help get people to pre-write the script. And we even role play that a few times. Actually, remember that when you were explaining the example, Brad. The main thing is to be prepared for tough conversations so that you're more effective when you do it. No different than driver training or sales training or anything else. It's a great tool. So the third one is, okay, that's role playing and getting ready for those conversations. What do you actually do when someone misses expectations? And there's lots of different things you can do, but doing nothing reinforces that missing expectation is okay. And my favorite base about when someone misses, and we've talked about this in a previous episode, is the flinch. You got to have a reaction. And if your reaction is smiling, that's a problem. So the reaction can be as simple as, oh, really? I thought that was done. Or, oh, you've got like 2 days left. Or, oh, did you tell the client? Or, oh, did you let Mary Jo know in finance that like some sort of, oh, right? And I remember I shared this story, before. I had a friend that was in used car sales when I was in college, and he had a technique for negotiating the trade-in values, which the dealership obviously wanted to be low. He would look at the car and he'd point at all the scratches to make the person uncomfortable. And then when he'd say, so what do you want for it? And then they give him a number, and his answer was the same every time. Whoa, is there a gold brick in the trunk? It was a cheesy used car salesman line, but he was flinching to what they were saying to make them uncomfortable. And psychologically, it works. So somehow there needs to be something that's authentic that even without words gives, or without explanation, makes them see that it's not okay. Because the idea of accountability is that one of the key elements is internal tension. Yeah. They should, if they aren't already, some people already feel it. Yeah. But if they aren't feeling internal tension, our job is to make sure that comes to the surface and they can soak in it for a minute or so. That's how people learn. We learn from those kind of situations.
Yeah. One of the best ways for flinch is silence. Just don't say anything, but that may not be your tool of choice.
Depends on the look on your face though, Brad. I've got I've got some CEOs that are silent about it. And there's a way of being silent, but being silent and having no reaction also, I've seen it be a situation where it can endorse it. So there's strategic silence that can have an impact, and then there's just pure silence that doesn't. So
yeah. Oh no, I agree. Also, there's something like so what do you plan to do about it? Is that going to succeed? But the best one that I've heard came from the local chief of police in my state. And it goes a little something like this. Can you help me to understand how that happened, whatever it might be?
That's a good one.
Can you help me to understand? It just cuts through. What you're saying is, I don't understand. What you're saying is, I'm not accusing you of being wrong, but I don't understand. It's got such a layer. And you would imagine he is in many situations where he needs to hold people accountable at multiple levels.
Yes. And he doesn't want to turn into an idiot and yell and scream and lose his cool.
Yeah, that's it. And so it's the comeback line that just cuts through everything.
I love it.
Can you help me to understand why you didn't lock the car? Can you help me understand why you gave that person a blank check, whatever it is,
or you didn't get back to the customer, or you didn't get, that's good.
It's
another great one from a coach that you and I both know, a guy named Dave Bainey. Hey, I showed up to Dave, great coach now down in Las Vegas. Was when someone doesn't deliver on a quarterly goal we call rock. He goes, okay, so was that bad strategy or was it bad execution? Basically, were you thinking wrong or were you lazy?
Yeah.
Bad execution means you didn't do the work, or you didn't plan it. You didn't plan your work well, not just lazy. But it really is, I had a great chat with David. It's one or the other. You didn't think well up front or have a good strategy, or you didn't plan the work well. It's one of the two. So which one is it? And let's learn. So those are kind of, great ones in terms of questions. Sometimes it can be things like in a meeting, again, there's the flinch, or the long silence. Okay. And then it's like, okay, we'd better have a separate meeting about this. This is a really important one. How about you come with me and meet me in the CFO later on. It's the adult version of sending the kid to the principal's office.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also calling a separate meeting or telling them to stay back after the meeting. The other thing is, geez, I think you're going to have a long night. Yeah. We got to have it. I need it by tonight. I need it by 9 tomorrow. Full knowing they're probably going to pull an all-nighter. Or, I hope you didn't have a lot of plans this weekend. I'm really there's not flexibility on this. It was supposed to be in today. We got to have it for Monday. I'm going to call the CEO of the other company and make sure, but we got to have it. Let me know what you need to get it done. Things like that, where you basically hold the standard up.
Yes.
And let them feel the consequences, and don't save them. Don't have empathy. They've got to feel, because if you don't create the tension and hold them accountable and they get away with it, some of them will start to work you. They'll realize that you're soft and realize they don't have to deliver. They can make up a BS excuse or whatever it happens to be
and get away with it. There's got to be a consequence. Now, sometimes some leaders will think that consequence means firing someone and that's it. But the point that we're making here is that there are actually about 100 different ways, maybe even more, that you can hold someone accountable, or you can create a consequence without firing. Because I reckon that firing is actually failing. When you have to fire someone, what you've done is you've failed to create that environment of consequence using the tools to get them there. Now, maybe not every single time.
I don't buy that.
Come on. Buy it a little bit.
No, buy a little bit. I'll buy anything a little bit. I'll buy the world is flat a little bit. I agree with you. I agree with on some of that. But there's some people who are just not accountable, and they're just not a good fit for your organization or a role you have. I believe in trying to make it work, Brad, but at some point, there's some people that get their homework done, and there's some people who make excuses.
That's correct.
Yeah. And I don't think, and you can't fix them all.
You can't fix them all. That's not what I'm advocating. What I'm saying is that there are 100 opportunities that you have until you fire someone. And that if you get to the point where you have fired someone, right, you have failed to utilize those 100 opportunities.
If you haven't used the 100, yes. If you've used the 100 and they still hasn't worked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of and that's why when someone wants to fire someone, I like to double check first that they've tried a whole bunch of things first. Because often the leader hasn't done a bunch of the right things. The person, they haven't tried a number of different techniques to get it to work. Because there's some people who are accountable without any work at all. They just are. And there's some people that need some support to get there, and some of them won't be. A couple other ones we had really, at some point, putting a warning letter in writing, or a penalty, or a meeting with HR and the CEO, or putting them on a performance improvement plan, or a final warning. Or send them off for training to get, if they're having inappropriate behavior, send them off to some sort of training that's about having appropriate behavior, whatever it happens to be. And then obviously you can, if that doesn't work, if someone's not accountable, I mean, there's no point changing their role, because that's probably not going to fix it unless they hate the work they're doing. Maybe you demote them, maybe they're too senior, or maybe they leave. But like, as you're saying, that's the last resort. You got a lot of other things you can try first. And often people aren't good at doing those things with their people, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. And one of the issues that I've certainly seen before is that people, maybe let's say more junior supervisors or managers, still want to be the person's friend, or they see it as a friend relationship first, and therefore they don't want to overcome that. But there may be a third option that one might not have considered, and that is, yep. Kevin, I like you, Kevin, but you said that you were going to deliver 100 widgets. So what I'm doing there is trying to introduce a third element to the conversation. I like you, Kevin. Like, you've been doing a good job on everything else, but you've really let the team down over here. What are you planning? What are you doing about it? So rather than kind of directly berating you, I'm trying to work this third element to say, this is a bit of a shared problem, but mostly your problem. And what's your plan over there?
What's your plan? And is there a way I can assist?
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. All right. The next one is meetings to review goals and key projects and accountabilities. And what's interesting, our note here is that meetings are leading. It's your opportunity to lead your people, and reviewing is remembering, right? When you go and review goals, people forget. And there's the people who just don't do the work, and there's people who get so busy they forget. And as a simple thing on our team, on our weekly meeting, we go through the company level goals every single week. Generally, we get about 11 weeks a quarter. We get to review it because of holidays and such, and our meetings are on Mondays, and we don't have it if there's a holiday. But it's a reminder of it. So what is the system that you have to keep things moving ahead? Same with critical projects. If you've got critical projects, and what do people do? They have a weekly meeting or a bi-weekly meeting or a 3 times a week meeting to review those critical tasks. And lo and behold, it helps the project move ahead more smoothly, or even a daily meeting. So it's the meetings or a mechanism to really help this. And ideally, you're not, as a leader holding everyone's hand on it. You're getting your direct reports to make their own updates or their own progress reports. But it's setting up the communication rhythm that makes it work much better. And that's why, as an organization, weekly meetings, reviewing the goals every week, reviewing the key numbers every week, dramatically makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. The meetings are so important around this accountability, and ideally in an environment of peer accountability. We'll talk about in a moment. But one of the things that I advocate for is that people verbalize their status update. So they're going to verbally say, "I'm red." And then to build a system around this thing I call last 7, next 7. So I'm red. This is what I did in the last 7 days. Nothing. This is what I'm going to do in the next 7 days. I'm going to call 14 prospects or whatever it is. So making that a part of a simple update around the things that need to be actioned, so that you're not holding the person accountable, but the environment or the system is creating that accountability.
Yep. I agree totally. And that works. Again, with our team, we talk about what's the progress, stucks, and then next steps. Same kind of an idea, but it's verbal, weekly, which makes it fast. But then you're staying on top of it, and you got 10, 12 reminders every quarter. So what's the system to keep it top of mind? And even a short meeting to just troubleshoot any issues. It works very, very well. It's just underutilized.
It's verbal. Sorry, Kev, just to very quickly make the point, verbal matters, because if I see on a dashboard a red, it's very, very different to have to stand up next to my peers and say, I failed on that, or I'm well behind. And that, it really makes a big difference.
It does. And that takes us into this next one, which is the peer accountability. And, we're both massive fans of having people provide updates, quick updates of sharing where they're at. And when we do a quarterly meeting, we review company goals. The goal owners give a status report, where they got to, and if there's anything lingering, what they have to do to wrap it up or the next step. When we go through the individual leaders in the company, we go through their KPIs, their critical number in the rocks. We can do it in 5 minutes a person because it's pre-populated and it's a system, but they stand and deliver their own report card every 90 days. And ideally they do even a monthly version of it as well. But it's just, it puts the onus on the shoulders of the person responsible or accountable to do the work, pardon me. But they're doing it in front of their peers, which can create, great transparency, great team environment. It's a simple mechanism. I think people underutilize it and do too much stuff in silos where people can hide in silos.
And peer accountability really is, the level above the leader holding people accountable. When you're in a group and everyone holds one another accountable, and then only the leader's role of that group is to be the final arbiter rather than controlling every single interaction or managing every interaction, it's much better. So that anyone in your team should be able to step up and say, Kevin, I thought you said you were going to do that by Tuesday. And they're doing that because they believe in the goals of the team and they believe in the team's success, rather than who cares if Kevin didn't make the number. And so one example of peer accountability, which is a little bit different, is a company called Spotify, who you're probably aware of. So just a simple tool that Spotify use, they work in small clusters or groups. And what they do above each set of workstations, they've got a whiteboard. And on that whiteboard every day, the group needs to write where they're stuck. It could be, I'm stuck with technology, I'm stuck with an individual who has been away, or I'm stuck with anything else, or we're trying to solve this problem in the project. But it's a transparent level of accountability that is a different way to think about it.
Yep. Yeah. All of these things are creating an environment where the weight is more on the shoulders of the people accountable for the work or where they have to get done and the team, and just making it more normal to have these things. And when you have a system with reporting and talking about your stucks or where you need help or whatever it happens to be, things just happen more naturally. And as a leader, if you just keep holding up the bar high, making sure there's clear but important goals that stretch people enough to be relevant, the system runs a lot better. And you just got to flinch, and you just got to make sure there is consequences. And if there's a person who is obviously not delivering consistently, you got to deal with it. Otherwise, the whole team starts to drop their game because they say, why would I bother? If I can, if I can do all this and deliver, but if Kevin is doing a crappy job and he's still getting his paycheck every 2 weeks and he still gets a piece of the bonus, like, come on. So that's the part where you can kill the whole system. So great conversation. So the part 2 on accountability, episode 71, we had the elements. Here is more the behavioral piece of it and the emotional piece of actually bringing it to life and ideally creating an environment of accountability. Kind of 4 main points: set the environment, have the right conversations, have the right reactions when people miss expectations, have right meeting rhythms to remind people of what needs to be done. And then finally, a culture of pure accountability. And as you said, Brad, it's the highest form of accountability, where people are accountable to each other and the boss doesn't have to sit there and crack the whip.
Very good. Very good. We're going to have both the elements plus the environment. Good episode today. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. As always, Kevin is available at lawrenceandco.com, and you can find me, Brad, at evolutionpartners.com. Do have yourself a good week. We look forward to chatting to you again next week. Take care.